When you are designing a training course, the number one tip I can give you is to use MASTER to structure your training workshop. MASTER is an acronym and it brings together a lot of the accelerated learning principles. It was designed by a chap called Colin Rose, and I use this all the time in my training courses. And MASTER stands for mindset. So this is about getting people in the right mindset for learning, helping them to understand what's in it for them. It's about creating that desire. And we can do that up front before the course. It should definitely start before the workshop, but we can reinforce that in the first part of the workshop by asking people what do they hope to get out of today, and helping them to see how the workshop will help them to achieve their goals. A stands for acquire. So this is where the participants acquire information. This is where they learn something new. Typically that used to be done by the trainer in front of the room providing information, and there's nothing wrong with that. There are other ways that you can do that as well. So you can watch a video, you can ask people to share their own experiences, you can provide some reading. There are lots of different ways that we can do this. People can do their own research, but we provide some information at that stage. S stands for sift for the meaning. So once we've provided that information, we ask people to then unpack that learning and dig a little deeper and understand what that means, and think about it from different perspectives. And this is where we'll typically start to introduce group work, for example, to really explore either a whole concept or maybe a part of a concept that then other people can, they can feed back to each other on that. T stands for trigger the memory. So how are we going to provide that little hook that will link back into the learning? Lots of ways to do this. It may be an exercise or an activity. It may be something that's a little bit silly. It may be something that's active. It may be something that's just phenomenally relevant and really makes somebody understand how something applies to a very specific situation. We can use things like mnemonics as well in this to make things easy to remember. So case studies, for example, it's if you give the characters in the case studies quite unusual names or use alliteration or quite silly names, they will remember that person, then they will then remember the case study, and they will then remember the learning from it. Similarly with mnemonics, or getting people to paint a picture, draw a picture or something like that, all helps to trigger the memory. Once we've got those triggers in place, we can then ask people to exhibit the learning. Again, there's lots of ways that we can do that. We can do that through something as simple as a card sort exercise. We can do that via a quiz. We can do that via presentations, role plays. We can do that via feeding back on case studies. Lots of different ways, but what I would say is we don't expect people to exhibit their learning before they've had time to explore it. So where a lot of training courses go wrong is we go straight from provide information to, right, show me that you know what you're doing, without that time in between. And I think that's when people decide that they don't like courses, or they certainly don't like role plays and things like that, because they haven't had that in-between time to really explore maybe bits at a time to get another perspective. And you don't need to do all of this for every single thing that you cover, but periodically throughout the training, and certainly after each big chunk, big section if you like, we need to be making sure that we're doing something to exhibit the learning and taking people through that whole cycle. The R in MASTER stands for review and reflect. So whilst it's good practice to have little mini reviews at the end of each section, we do need to have a big review at the end. Really encourage people to share what they've learned and what they are going to apply and how. So the action planning element fits in here as well. And often, if your training course has been really insightful, really engaging, people have got a lot of things on their mind and you can't necessarily pin them down to just one thing. So my preference when I'm delivering is to ask them to pick out the key learning points, and from that choose 3 things that they might go away and apply, and to discuss that with another delegate who can then follow it up, or if their manager ideally will follow it up and say, well, which one of those are you definitely going to do and how we're going to measure that success. So we follow master for the whole workshop, and the ASTE is kind of repeated multiple times within that workshop for every section.